Tycoon, shocked to discover his ex-wife is raising twins in secret. "Sir, this came for you. Hand-delivered, no return address," his assistant had said before quietly excusing herself. Alexander's manicured fingers traced the edge of the envelope, a strange feeling of unease settling in his stomach. He was used to receiving all sorts of correspondence, but something about this felt different, personal. With a swift motion, he broke the seal and tipped the contents onto his mahogany desk. A single photograph fluttered out. Time seemed to stop as his eyes focused on the image. Two children, no more than 5 years old, playing on a swing set. Their dark hair caught the sunlight, their laughing faces mirrors of each other, and more disturbingly, mirrors of his own childhood photos. "What the hell?" he whispered, his hands beginning to tremble. The resemblance was uncanny. The shape of their eyes, the curve of their smiles, even the way one of them tilted their head. It was like looking at himself in duplicate. His heart began to race as he flipped the photo over. Written in neat handwriting were 3 words, "They're your children." Alexander collapsed back into his leather chair, the photo shaking in his grip. His mind raced through possibilities, calculations, dates, and landed squarely on one person. Sarah Martinez, his ex-wife. "No," he breathed, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "It's impossible. She would have told me. She would have." But even as he said the words, doubt crept in. Their divorce 6 years ago had been explosive, ugly. She had disappeared from his life so completely, it was as if she'd never existed. And now, he reached for his phone, his finger hovering over his lawyer's number. The city lights began to twinkle as dusk settled in. But Alexander Chen's world had already gone dark with the weight of this revelation. "Twins," he whispered to the empty office, the word feeling foreign on his tongue. "I have twins." The photo trembled in his hand as the magnitude of what he was seeing, what he had missed, crashed over him like a tidal wave. 5 years. 5 years of first steps, first words, first everything gone. Stolen. Hidden. His free hand clenched into a fist on the desk. The powerful tech mogul, the man who controlled billion-dollar deals with a single signature, felt completely and utterly powerless in the face of this simple photograph. "Why, Sarah?" he asked the silence. "Why would you keep this from me?" The city continued its endless dance of lights below, unaware that in his tower of glass and steel, Alexander Chen's carefully constructed world had just been shattered by a single photograph and the weight of what could have been. "Mommy, look what I drew," Sophia exclaimed, holding up a crayon masterpiece, while Lucas concentrated on building a tower of blocks nearby. Sarah's heart swelled as she looked at her children, their faces perfect mirrors of each other and of him. She pushed the thought away, as she had done countless times before. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," she smiled, hanging the drawing on the refrigerator alongside dozens of others. Her fingers lingered on the paper, tracing the childish scrawl that spelled out "my family." Just 3 stick figures. The kitchen timer chimed, pulling her from her reverie. "All right, munchkins, dinner time. Go wash those hands." As the twins scampered off, their giggles echoing through the house, Sarah caught her reflection in the window. At 38, she'd built a respected career as a pediatric surgeon, her days filled with saving children's lives and her evenings devoted to her own. Nobody at Boston General knew about her past life as Mrs. Chun, and that's exactly how she wanted it. "Mommy," Lucas's voice carried from the bathroom. "Tommy at school asked me why we don't have a daddy like he does." Sarah froze, the pasta strainer suspended over the sink. These questions were becoming more frequent, each one a dagger to her heart. "Well, honey," she began, her practiced response catching in her throat. "Some families are different, and that's okay. We have so much love in our family, just the 3 of us." Later that night, after tucking the twins into bed, Sarah sat in her home office, staring at a locked drawer in her desk. Inside lay a USB drive containing every photo, every document, every piece of evidence that had led to her decision 6 years ago. "I did the right thing," she whispered to herself, but the words felt hollow in the darkness. Her hand unconsciously moved to her stomach, remembering the moment she discovered she was carrying twins, just 2 weeks after finding those emails, those photos, those bank statements that revealed Alexander's true nature. Her phone buzzed with a text from the hospital about tomorrow's surgeries, pulling her back to the present. Dr. Sarah Martinez had a full schedule of saving lives waiting for her. Mrs. Sarah Chun and her heartbreak were locked away in that drawer, where they belonged. But as she walked past the twins' room, their peaceful breathing a gentle rhythm in the night, she couldn't shake the feeling that her carefully constructed world was balanced on a knife's edge. One wrong move, one discovered secret, and everything would come crashing down. "I'll protect you," she promised softly to her sleeping children. No matter what. Little did she know, miles away in a high-rise office, Alexander Chun was already setting in motion the events that would shatter her protective walls. Looking up, he froze. There, by the duck pond, was a face he hadn't seen in 6 years. Sarah Martinez, no, Sarah Chun, was helping 2 children feed the ducks. His grip tightened on his phone as recognition hit him like a thunderbolt. "No way," he muttered, discreetly raising his phone to capture a photo. The children turned, chasing each other around their mother, and David felt his breath catch. The resemblance was unmistakable. His hands trembled as he dialed Alexander's private number. "David, this better be important. I'm heading into a board meeting." Alexander's sharp voice cut through the line. "Sir, I think you need to see something. I'm sending you a photo right now. I'm in Boston, and..." David swallowed hard. "You need to see this for yourself." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for what felt like eternity. "Where exactly are you?" Alexander's voice had dropped to a dangerous whisper. "Boston Common. Sir, the children. They look exactly like Dash. Don't move. Don't approach them. Just keep watching." The line went dead. David observed from his bench as Sarah gathered the twins, her protective instincts evident in every movement. Lucas, or was it Sophia, dropped their bread bag, and the sound of their laughter carried across the park. "Come on, sweeties," Sarah's voice drifted over. "We need to get you back to school. And Mommy has surgery in an hour." David's phone buzzed with a text from Alexander. "Tell me everything." As he typed his response, David watched Sarah and the twins disappear down the path toward Beacon Hill. The weight of what he'd just discovered pressed heavily on his chest. He'd been at Alexander and Sarah's wedding years ago, had witnessed their bitter divorce, and now he held a secret that would shake his boss's world to its core. His phone buzzed again. "Book me on the next flight to Boston. Clear my schedule for the week." Looking at the last glimpse of the twins' retreating forms, David couldn't help but wonder if he just lit the fuse on a bomb that would destroy the careful peace of multiple lives. In her office at Boston General, Sarah's phone chimed with a calendar reminder. Twins parent-teacher conference, next week. She had no way of knowing that by then. Her carefully guarded secret would be unraveling faster than she could ever have imagined. 6 years ago, he muttered, staring out the window of his luxury SUV as it wound through the city streets. She was pregnant when she left. She knew. She had to have known. The vehicle pulled up to the Four Seasons, but Alexander barely noticed the deferential staff or the opulent suite. He paced the room like a caged tiger, loosening his tie as memories crashed over him. Flashback, "I'm not feeling well," Sarah had said that morning, 6 years ago. "I'll see the doctor today." It was the last normal conversation they'd ever had. By evening, she discovered his secrets, and within a week, she'd vanished from his life. Present Alexander's hands shook as he poured himself a drink. The photo from David was projected on his laptop screen, the twins' faces haunting him with their unmistakable resemblance. His phone rang, his private investigator. "Mr. Chun, we've confirmed it. Birth certificates for Lucas and Sophia Martinez, born at Massachusetts General Hospital. Mother, Sarah Martinez. Father, listed as unknown." The crystal glass shattered in Alexander's grip, shards tinkling across the hardwood floor as bourbon soaked into his Italian leather shoes. "Unknown." His voice was barely a whisper. "I'm their father and she..." She made me unknown? He sank into a chair, blood dripping unnoticed from his cut hand. The city lights twinkled beyond his window, each one representing a moment he'd lost with his children. First steps, first words, first days of school. Sir? The investigator's voice continued. There's more. Dr. Martinez is scheduled to speak at a medical conference tomorrow. Boston General's Pediatric Wing, 9 a.m. Alexander's jaw clenched. Send me everything you have. School records, medical records, their daily routines. Everything. After ending the call, he walked to the window, pressing his forehead against the cool glass. Below, a father was walking with his young daughter, her small hand in his. The sight sent a physical pain through his chest. 5 years, he breathed, his breath fogging the glass. 5 years of their lives, just gone. My children don't even know I exist. He pulled out his phone, opening his photo gallery to the picture David had sent. In it, Lucas was wearing a red sweater, his smile bright and carefree. Sophia's dark hair was in pigtails, her expression a perfect mirror of her brother's joy. Tomorrow, Sarah, he whispered to the night sky. Tomorrow you'll have to face what you've done. In her home across the city, Sarah tucked her children into bed, unaware that in less than 12 hours, her carefully constructed world would begin to crumble. As she kissed each small forehead, she couldn't have known that Alexander Chun was already planning how to tear down the walls she'd built to protect her most precious secrets. The clock ticked toward midnight, counting down the hours until their inevitable collision. Mr. Chun, his lead investigator Marcus, pointed to a series of surveillance photos. The twins attend Beacon Hill Elementary. They're in Mrs. Thompson's kindergarten class. Every Monday and Wednesday, they have swimming lessons at the YMCA. On Thursdays, it's piano. Alexander's fingers traced the edge of a photo showing Lucas struggling with his sheet music, his small face scrunched in concentration. He holds the pencil exactly like I do, he whispered, more to himself than anyone else. Their nanny, Maria Rodriguez, picks them up at 3 p.m. when Drive Martinez is in surgery, Marcus continued. They spend weekends either at home or... Stop, Alexander interrupted, his voice tight. Show me their medical records again. He scanned the documents, his heart clenching at each detail. Sophia had been hospitalized for pneumonia at age 3. Lucas had a mild peanut allergy. Both had their father's blood type. Sir, Marcus hesitated. There's something else you should see. He pulled out a file labeled Personal Observations. The twins, they've started asking questions. Our source at their school overheard Lucas asking his teacher why he doesn't have a daddy like other kids. Alexander's hand crashed down on the desk, sending papers flying. Enough. I've heard enough. But Marcus pressed on, his voice gentle but firm. There's more, sir. Dr. Martinez has been seeing a therapist, Dr. Eleanor Wright. We obtained access to some of her notes. Alexander's head snapped up. And she's been struggling with guilt. The entries suggest she knows she made a mistake keeping this secret, but she's trapped by her own decisions now. She's afraid. Afraid of what? Alexander demanded. Afraid you'll take them away from her completely, that you'll use your money and influence to destroy her, just like I did to others, Alexander finished, his voice hollow. He walked to the window, watching the morning traffic below. She thinks I'm still that man. His phone buzzed, another update from the school surveillance team. Twins arrived at school. Dr. Martinez seemed distracted, hugged them longer than usual. Possible she suspects something? Alexander straightened his tie, a determined glint in his eye. Cancel my flight back to New York. I'm staying in Boston indefinitely. And Marcus, get me everything you can on their upcoming parent-teacher conference. I want to know every detail of my children's lives that I've missed. As his team dispersed to continue their surveillance, Alexander stood alone in the suite, surrounded by fragments of his children's lives captured in photos and reports. Each piece of paper represented a moment he could never get back, a memory he should have been part of. In his pocket, his phone vibrated with an alert. Dr. Martinez entering Boston General Hospital. Conference presentation in 30 minutes. Time to face our past, Sarah, he murmured, picking up his suit jacket. Ready or not? Across town, Sarah was reviewing her presentation notes, unaware that her carefully constructed walls were about to come crashing down. The weight of her secrets pressed heavier with each passing minute. Like a countdown to an explosion she couldn't stop. Congratulations, Mrs. Chun. You're carrying twins, the doctor had said, her voice cheerful and oblivious to Sarah's inner turmoil. Sarah had sat there, trembling, the morning's discoveries still burning in her mind. Alexander's hidden accounts, the emails to his lawyers about controlling assets, the systematic destruction of his previous partners' lives. Would you like me to call your husband? The nurse had asked. No, Sarah had whispered, her protective instincts already kicking in. No, don't call anyone. Present and knock at her office door startled her back to reality. Dr. Martinez? They're ready for your presentation. Sarah quickly wiped away a stray tear, straightening her white coat. As she walked toward the conference room, her phone buzzed with a text from Maria, their nanny. The twins asked about their father again during breakfast. Sophia was crying. She stopped in the hallway, leaning against the wall as the weight of her choices pressed down on her. The memory of that morning 6 years ago crashed over her again. Flashback, she'd been sitting in her car, surrounded by printouts of Alexander's schemes. Financial records showing how he'd systematically destroyed his business rivals, using their families as leverage. Emails discussing how to neutralize anyone who stood in his way. I won't let him use them as pawns, she'd sworn to herself, one hand protectively over her still flat stomach. I won't let them become weapons in his games. Present, Dr. Martinez? A colleague's voice pulled her back. Are you all right? You look pale. Sarah forced a smile. I'm fine, just reviewing my notes. But as she entered the conference room, her heart nearly stopped. There, in the back row, she caught a glimpse of someone who looked exactly like David Chun, Alexander's right-hand man. Before she could confirm, he was gone. Her hands shook as she set up her presentation. You're being paranoid, she whispered to herself. He can't know. He can't. Later that afternoon, alone in her office, she pulled out her personal journal. Dear Lucas and Sophia, one day, you'll ask me why I made the choices I did. I hope you'll understand that I was trying to protect you from becoming pieces in a game I'd seen played out too many times. Your father, he sees people as assets to be managed, obstacles to be removed. I couldn't bear the thought of you becoming bargaining chips in his world of corporate warfare. But lately, when you ask about him, when I see the hurt in your eyes, I wonder if I've made the biggest mistake of my life. Have I protected you, or have I stolen something precious from you both? Her phone buzzed again, a notification from the school about the upcoming parent-teacher conference. Sarah closed her eyes, the weight of her secrets becoming almost unbearable. What have I done? She whispered to the empty room. What have I really done? Outside her window, a black SUV with tinted windows pulled away from the hospital, its occupants reporting back to Alexander Chun about his ex-wife's every move. Dr. Martinez, there's someone here insisting on seeing you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says... The door swung open before she could finish. Alexander Chun stood in the doorway, his imposing figure silhouetted against the hallway lights. 6 years hadn't changed him, still immaculate in his tailored suit, still radiating that dangerous mixture of power and control. Sarah's world tilted on its axis. The pen she'd been holding clattered to the floor, the sound deafening in the sudden silence. Hello, Sarah. His voice was exactly as she remembered it, smooth, controlled, lethal. She gripped her desk to steady herself. How dare you come here? How dare I? Alexander's laugh was cold as he closed the door behind him. That's rich, coming from the woman who hid my children from me for 5 years. Security. Sarah reached for her phone, but Alexander's words stopped her. Lucas has a peanut allergy. Sophia had pneumonia when she was 3. They both take piano lessons on Thursdays. The blood drained from Sarah's face. You've been watching us? Watching, he moved closer, his presence filling the room. I've been learning about the lives you stole from me. Every detail, every moment, every milestone I missed. I protected them from you. Sarah's voice cracked. I saw what you did to the Williams family, to the Petersons, using their children as leverage in your corporate games. I read the emails, Alexander. I saw everything. You saw what you wanted to see, he growled, pulling out his phone. A photo of the twins playing in the park filled the screen. Look at them, Sarah. Look at our children. Did you ever stop to think they might need their father? Need you? Sarah laughed bitterly. Like your other victims needed you? Tell me, how many lives have you destroyed since I left? Alexander's facade cracked slightly. They're my children too. You had no right. I had every right. Sarah's voice rose, years of pent-up emotion breaking free. When I found out I was pregnant, I also discovered you were planning to use our marriage, our future children, as part of your takeover strategy for Martinez Pharmaceuticals. My own family's company. That was business, Sarah. This is different. Different. She stood, trembling with rage and fear. Nothing is just business to you, Alexander. Everything and everyone is a piece on your chessboard. A tense silence filled the room. Outside, life at the hospital continued, pages over the intercom. Footsteps in the hallway, the distant sound of sirens. But in Sarah's office, time seemed suspended between them. I want to meet them, Alexander finally said, his voice softer but no less determined. No. Sarah's response was immediate. You don't have a choice anymore. He moved toward the door, then paused. The parent-teacher conference next week. I'll be there. And Sarah? His eyes met hers with chilling intensity. If you try to run again, if you try to keep them from me, remember who I am and what I'm capable of. As the door closed behind him, Sarah collapsed into her chair, her whole body shaking. She pulled out her phone with trembling fingers, dialing Maria's number. Pack the twins' overnight bags, she whispered. We might need to leave quickly. But even as she spoke the words, she knew running wouldn't work this time. Alexander Chun had found his children, and he never let go of what he considered his. The game had begun, and the stakes were higher than ever. Mommy, Sophia whispered, her small voice trembling. Jenny at school said everyone has a daddy, even if they don't live together. Where's our daddy? Lucas, who had been pretending to read in his own bed across the room, put down his book. The moonlight streaming through the window illuminated both their faces, perfect mirrors of Alexander's features. Sarah's voice caught in her throat. After Alexander's appearance at her office, the weight of their questions felt unbearable. It's complicated, sweetheart. Did he not want us? Lucas asked, his voice small and hurt. Is that why he never comes to our school plays? Sarah felt her heart shatter. She moved to sit between their beds, taking both their tiny hands in hers. No, my loves, that's not why. Then why, Mommy? Sophia's eyes filled with tears. Tommy's daddy comes to his baseball games, and Emma has 2 daddies. Why don't we have even one? The innocence of their questions, the pain in their voices. It was all too much. Sarah struggled to maintain her composure as memories of Alexander's threats from earlier that day echoed in her mind. Your daddy, she started, then stopped, searching for words that wouldn't hurt them more. Your daddy doesn't know how special and wonderful you are. Not yet. Could we find him? Lucas sat up, hope lighting his features. Like in Mrs. Thompson's book about the lost puppy finding his family? Sarah pulled them both into a tight hug, hiding her tears in their hair. Sometimes, she whispered, grown-up things are more complicated than stories. Later that night, after the twins had finally fallen asleep, Sarah stood in their doorway, watching their peaceful faces. Her phone buzzed with a text from Alexander. They deserve to know the truth, all of it. Don't make them suffer for your fears. She typed back with shaking fingers. You don't know what you're asking. You'll destroy their innocence, just like you destroy everything else. His response came immediately. I'm their father. Nothing you do can change that. The question is, will you tell them or shall I? Sarah slid down the wall outside their room, the phone falling from her grip. In the quiet of the night, she could hear the twins' soft breathing, their occasional murmurs in sleep. The sound she'd used to comfort herself through 5 years of secrets and lies now felt like an accusation. "Mommy," Sophia's sleepy voice called out. "Can you check under my bed again? I heard a noise." Sarah wiped her tears and stood, straightening her shoulders. "Coming, sweetheart." As she reassured her daughter about imaginary monsters, Sarah couldn't help but think about the very real one that had just re-entered their lives. The difference was, this time, she wasn't sure if she was protecting her children or hurting them by keeping them away from their father. The night stretched ahead, full of impossible choices and unavoidable truths. Sarah's hands trembled as she stared at her phone, notifications flooding in from every news outlet. Outside her home, reporters had already begun gathering, their cameras flashing through the morning mist. "Dr. Martinez, any comment on the custody battle? Did you deliberately deceive Mr. Chan about his children? How do you respond to allegations of parental alienation?" Maria rushed into the kitchen, her face pale. "Dr. Martinez, they're everywhere, even at the back entrance." Sarah's legal team was already on speakerphone. "Sarah, this is serious. Chen's lawyers have filed for emergency custody proceedings. They're painting you as an unstable mother who deliberately denied the children their father." "He's trying to destroy me," Sarah whispered, watching as Lucas and Sophia ate their breakfast, blissfully unaware of the storm raging outside, just like he always does. Her phone buzzed with a text from Alexander. "You forced my hand, Sarah. I gave you a chance to do this quietly." The twin school called next. "Dr. Martinez, there are reporters on school grounds. Perhaps it's better if the children stay home today." Sarah felt her world spinning out of control. She looked at her children, Alexander's eyes staring back at her from 2 innocent faces. "Mommy, why are there so many people outside?" Sophia asked, pressing her face against the window. "And why was our picture on the lady's phone at the gate?" Lucas added, his forehead wrinkled in confusion. Before Sarah could answer, her phone rang again, her hospital's chief of surgery. "Sarah, the board is calling an emergency meeting. This publicity, it's affecting patient confidence. We need to discuss your position." She ended the call, feeling the walls closing in. The carefully constructed life she'd built was crumbling around her. "Maria, take the children upstairs," she managed, her voice barely steady. "Use the playroom, away from the windows." Once they were gone, Sarah collapsed at her kitchen table, Alexander's latest message glaring from her phone. "My lawyers will be in touch. I trust you'll make this easy on the children. After all, you've already put them through enough, haven't you?" The sound of helicopter blades cut through the air, news choppers circling her home like vultures. Her phone continued its relentless buzzing. "Dr. Martinez, this is Good Morning America. CNN would like to schedule an exclusive. TMZ here with a few questions." Upstairs, she heard Sophia's voice. "Mommy seems sad. Is it because of all the people outside?" "Sometimes grown-ups have big problems," Maria answered gently. Sarah's eyes fell on the twins' latest art project hanging on the fridge, a family drawing with just 3 figures. By tomorrow, their whole world would change forever. Her lawyer's voice cut through her thoughts. "Sarah, the emergency hearing is scheduled for tomorrow morning. Chen's team, they're not holding anything back. They're going to use everything they have." Outside, the media circus grew, each camera flash another crack in the foundation of the life she'd built to protect her children. Chun Technologies CEO in custody battle scandal. Wall Street questions Chen's stability amid family drama. Major investors demand emergency board meeting. His assistant entered cautiously. "Sir, the board members are waiting in the conference room. They're concerned about the publicity." Alexander adjusted his tie, his reflection in the window showing the strain of sleepless nights. The market had dropped 8 points since the news broke, and his phone hadn't stopped ringing with worried shareholders. In the conference room, 12 stern faces greeted him. Marcus Reynolds, the lead director, spoke first. Alexander, this personal situation is becoming a serious liability. Our medical technology division is particularly vulnerable. Hospitals are already questioning contracts. Questioning contracts? Alexander's voice was dangerously quiet. Because I'm fighting for my children? Because you're being painted as a ruthless predator in the press. Another board member interjected. Dr. Martinez is a respected pediatric surgeon. The optics are problematic. Alexander's fist crashed onto the table. The optics? My children were hidden from me for 5 years, and you're worried about optics. His phone buzzed, another alert about Boston General Hospital, considering terminating their multimillion-dollar technology contract. The irony wasn't lost on him. Sarah's hospital pushing back against his company's influence. Your personal vendetta is affecting shareholder value, Marcus continued. The board suggests taking a temporary leave of absence until... Absolutely not. Alexander's voice cut through the room like steel. I built this company from nothing. I won't step aside because some reporters don't like how I'm handling my family matters. Just then, his lawyer's message appeared. Sarah's legal team is releasing documents about your previous business tactics. They're drawing parallels between corporate takeovers and the custody battle. It's getting ugly. Alexander felt the weight of every eye in the room. His carefully cultivated image of controlled power was cracking, revealing the desperate father beneath. Sir, his assistant interrupted. Dr. Martinez is giving a press conference at Boston General. The boardroom's massive screen flickered to life, showing Sarah standing at a podium, looking both professional and vulnerable in her white coat. I never wanted this public spectacle, she was saying, her voice steady. I made choices to protect my children from being used as pawns in corporate games. The same games that have destroyed other families in Mr. Chen's path to success. Alexander watched as the stock ticker at the bottom of the screen showed another drop. His empire, built on control and precision, was being shaken by the very emotions he'd always considered a weakness. Meeting adjourned, he announced abruptly, standing. And gentlemen, remember who owns the controlling interest in this company before you consider any drastic measures. Alone in his office later, he stared at a photo of the twins on his phone. Everything he'd built, everything he controlled, was threatening to unravel. All for 2 small children who didn't even know his name. His phone rang, his PR team with more bad news about market perception and brand damage. But for the first time in his career, Alexander Chun wasn't thinking about the bottom line. He was thinking about Lucas's smile, so much like his own, and Sophia's eyes, filled with questions about the father she'd never known. Email correspondence from 2018. Rebecca pointed to the first stack. Detailed plans to use the Thompson children's medical conditions as leverage in their father's company takeover. The youngest was only 4, Alexander. Sound familiar? Alexander's jaw tightened, but his lawyer intervened. This is ancient history. It's not relevant to the current. Then there's this, Sarah's voice cut through, pulling out a USB drive. Recording of you, Alexander, discussing how to neutralize the Martinez family influence. My family, 2 weeks before I discovered I was pregnant. The memory hit Alexander like a physical blow. He remembered that conversation, remembered how clinical it had seemed at the time. Business was business, after all. Play it, Sarah demanded, her hands shaking but her voice steady. His own voice filled the room. The Martinez girl is the key. Once we're married, her shares transfer to our future children. Then it's just a matter of managing the situation. Children are excellent leverage points. Sarah's eyes met his across the table. Still want to claim this is about being a father, Alexander? Or is it about controlling another asset? The silence in the room was deafening. Alexander's own legal team shifted uncomfortably. You don't understand, he finally spoke, his voice hoarse. I was different then. When I saw them in that photo, different. Sarah laughed bitterly, pulling out more documents. Here's from last year, the Williams divorce. You used their daughter's college fund as a bargaining chip. their son's medical treatments as negotiation leverage. That was business, Alexander snapped, but his voice lacked its usual conviction. It's all business to you. Sarah's composure finally cracked. That's why I ran. That's why I hid them. Because to you, they wouldn't be children. They'd be assets. Bargaining chips. Weapons in your corporate arsenal. She pulled out one final piece of paper, a crayon drawing from Lucas. My son drew this last week. Know what he asked me? Mommy, why don't I have a daddy like everyone else? Do you know how that feels? To look into your child's eyes and know you're causing them pain, but believing it's better than the alternative. Alexander stared at the drawing, 3 stick figures, a mom and 2 children, standing under a rain cloud. His chest tightened. The hearing starts in an hour, Rebecca stated firmly. We're prepared to present all of this. Every email, every recording, every family you've torn apart in your quest for power. Is that really what you want your children to learn about their father? Alexander's phone buzzed, another market alert, another drop in stock prices. But for once, the numbers seemed meaningless compared to the crayon drawing in front of him. Your move, Alexander, Sarah said quietly, gathering her evidence. But remember, this time, you're not just destroying another family. You're destroying your own children's future. As she walked out, Alexander remained seated, surrounded by the paper trail of his past manipulations. For the first time in his life, the master strategist found himself in check, trapped by his own history of calculated cruelty. Mrs. Chun, Alexander's lawyer began. Dr. Martinez, Sarah corrected firmly, her eyes briefly meeting Alexander's. Dr. Martinez, please tell the court about the night you left Mr. Chun. Sarah closed her eyes, the memories flooding back with visceral clarity. It was raining. I remember because the thunder kept masking my sobs as I packed. Flashback lightning illuminated Sarah's trembling hands as she stuffed clothes into a suitcase. The pregnancy test still on the bathroom counter. 2 pink lines that should have brought joy instead of terror. Sarah, Alexander's voice had echoed through their penthouse. The Martinez Pharmaceuticals board meeting is tomorrow. Remember to wear the blue dress. It makes you look more amenable. She'd frozen, his earlier phone conversation playing in her mind. Once the baby comes, we'll have complete control. Sarah won't risk losing custody. Present, I found everything that night. Sarah continued, her voice breaking. The emails about using our future children as pawns. The plans to destroy my family's company. The recordings. Alexander shifted in his seat, his usual mask of control slipping. Play the recording, her lawyer requested. Alexander's voice filled the courtroom. Children are the ultimate leverage. Nobody fights back when their kids are at stake. The Martinez girl's pregnancy would fast-track everything. Sarah's hands gripped the witness stand. I wasn't even pregnant when you made those plans. You were counting on it, weren't you? Planning how to use our children before they even existed. Objection. Alexander's lawyer stood. Overruled. The judge responded, her eyes fixed on Sarah. The night I left, Sarah continued, tears now flowing freely. I found your playbook, every family you'd destroyed. The Henderson children, forced to change schools when their father wouldn't sell. The Phillips kids, watching their college funds disappear because their mother dared to challenge you. Alexander stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. That's not. Sit down, Mr. Chun, the judge warned. I was carrying twins, Sarah's voice cracked. 2 babies, 2 potential weapons in your corporate war. So I ran. And every time I doubted my decision, every time I felt guilty, I'd read another story about another family you'd torn apart. The courtroom fell silent. Even Alexander's usually stoic lawyers looked uncomfortable. And now, her lawyer prompted gently. Sarah looked directly at Alexander, really looked at him for the first time in 6 years. Now I see the same look in your eyes. The same calculation. You're not here because you love them. You're here because you can't stand losing control. Alexander's facade cracked, just slightly. You don't know what I feel, don't I? Sarah pulled out a familiar envelope. Your first response when you found out about them wasn't to reach out privately. It was a public lawsuit, media circus, attacks on my career, using our children to destroy me, just like you planned 6 years ago. The judge leaned forward. Dr. Martinez, in your professional opinion as a pediatric surgeon, what impact would Mr. Chen's methods have on the children? Sarah wiped her tears, straightening her shoulders. I've treated children from divorced families for years. The ones who suffer most are those used as bargaining chips. I couldn't let that happen to Lucas and Sophia. I couldn't. As she stepped down from the witness stand, the weight of 6 years of secrets seemed to press down on both of them. Alexander sat motionless, each word a reminder of the man he'd been, the man he perhaps still was. Dr. Martinez? The counselor, Ms. Reed, opened the door. Please come in. We need to discuss some concerning developments. The twins' artwork covered the walls of the small office, but these weren't the happy, colorful drawings from before. Dark colors dominated, angry scribbles and torn papers telling their own story. Lucas had another outburst today. Mrs. Thompson began gently. During story time, when we read My Family is Different. Sarah's hands trembled as she picked up Lucas's latest drawing, a black storm cloud over a broken house. He threw his book across the room, Ms. Reed continued. When we tried to talk to him, he just kept saying, everyone's lying about daddies. Flashback to earlier that day, my daddy's a hero, Tommy had announced during share time. He saves people in his big red fire truck. Well, my daddy takes me to baseball games, Jenny had added. Lucas had stood up suddenly, his small face red with anger. Stop talking about daddies. They're all lies. The book had gone flying, pages fluttering like broken wings. Present and Sophia? Sarah asked, though she already knew. Mrs. Thompson pulled out another drawing, a little girl alone in a corner, surrounded by question marks. She stopped participating in group activities. Yesterday, she spent recess sitting alone, asking her stuffed elephant why she doesn't deserve a daddy like other kids. Sarah's chest tightened. The media coverage. The other children have seen the news, Ms. Reed confirmed. Their parents are talking. The twins are picking up more than you might think. A knock interrupted them, the school secretary looking apologetic. Dr. Martinez? There's a Mr. Chun here for the twins' records. Sarah's blood ran cold. He has no right. He has his lawyers with him, the secretary added quietly, and more reporters outside. Through the office window, Sarah could see Sophia on the playground, sitting alone under her favorite tree. Lucas was in the classroom, head down on his desk, refusing to join the other children. Their teacher's report increased anxiety, difficulty concentrating, Ms. Reed continued. Lucas's aggression and Sophia's withdrawal are classic stress responses. They need stability, Dr. Martinez. They need the truth, Sarah whispered, watching her daughter trace patterns in the dirt, alone. Her phone buzzed. Alexander. I'm reviewing their school records. Their suffering ends now, Sarah. One way or another. Mrs. Thompson touched Sarah's arm gently. The twins are asking questions we can't answer. Last week, Lucas wrote in his journal, "Maybe Daddy doesn't love us because we're bad." The words hit Sarah like physical blows. She'd run to protect them from being weapons in Alexander's games, but now they were casualties of a different kind of war. "We're recommending immediate counseling," Ms. Reed said firmly. "This situation, it's affecting them more deeply than either parent might realize." Outside, another news van pulled up to the school. Inside, 2 small children carried the weight of their parents' choices, their innocence cracking under the pressure of adult battles they couldn't understand. "Mr. Chun," Dr. Walsh began, "you've been unusually quiet today. Would you like to share what's on your mind?" Alexander stared at the school report spread before him, Lucas's behavioral incidents, Sophia's withdrawal symptoms. His fingers traced over a particularly angry drawing his son had made. For the first time in his life, Alexander Chun struggled to find words. "I never meant for this." Sarah looked up sharply, surprised by the unfamiliar vulnerability in his voice. "When I saw their picture that first time," he continued, his voice barely above a whisper, "I was angry, furious. I wanted to—" He paused, his hands clenching. "I wanted to destroy you, Sarah, like I've destroyed everyone else who's ever stood in my way. And now," Dr. Walsh prompted gently. Alexander pulled out his phone, showing a video his investigators had captured Lucas having a meltdown at school, screaming about daddies being lies. "Now I'm watching my son." His voice cracked. "My son, who has my temper, my face, my everything. I'm watching him break apart because of what we're doing." Sarah's breath caught. This wasn't the calculating businessman she'd known. "Yesterday," Alexander continued, "I sat in my hotel room for hours, looking at their school pictures, and I realized I'm becoming my own father." The admission hung heavy in the air. "Your father?" Dr. Walsh leaned forward. "A man who saw children as extensions of his empire, who measured love in stock prices and success in surrendered assets." Alexander's laugh was hollow. "I swore I'd never be him, and here I am, destroying my own children to prove I have the right to love them." Sarah's hand trembled as she reached for her water glass. "Alexander, you were right." He cut her off, meeting her eyes. "6 years ago, I would have used them. They would have been pieces in my game. I can't deny that because—" He gestured to the stack of evidence she'd presented in court. "Because it's all there in black and white. My history, my patterns." Dr. Walsh nodded encouragingly. "And what do you want now, Mr. Chun? Not as a CEO, not as a victor in this battle, but as a father." Alexander pulled out one final paper, Sophia's latest drawing. A family of 4, all holding hands, but with question marks where faces should be. "I want to know them," he whispered. "Not own them, not control them, just know them. I want Lucas to understand that his anger isn't because he's bad, but because he's hurting. I want Sophia to stop hiding from the world because she thinks she doesn't deserve love." Tears, real, unexpected tears, fell onto the drawing. "I want to break the cycle. I want to be better than my father. Better than who I've been." Sarah watched this unfamiliar version of her ex-husband, this man who seemed stripped of his armor, finally facing his own demons. "And if I say no?" she asked softly. Alexander looked up, and for the first time, she saw no calculation in his eyes. Only pain, only truth. "Then I'll wait," he said simply. "I'll stop the lawyers, the media, the pressure. I'll wait until they're ready, until you're ready, because they deserve better than what both of us have been giving them." Dr. Walsh smiled slightly. "This," she said, "might be the first real step toward healing. That's her. The doctor who hid those poor children. How could any mother be so selfish? I heard she used them to get revenge." Sarah clutched her medical files closer to her chest, trying to ignore the stares. Her phone pinged with another notification. A mommy blog had posted a scathing article. "The Selfish Doctor. When Mothers Deny Children Their Fathers. At the hospital, things weren't much better. Dr. Roberts, her longtime mentor, caught her in the hallway before rounds." "Sarah," he said quietly, "the board is concerned. Parents are requesting different surgeons. They're questioning your judgment." "My judgment?" Sarah's voice cracked. "I've performed over 1,000 successful surgeries. I've saved—" "This isn't about your surgical skills," he interrupted gently. "It's about trust. Parents are asking how they can trust their children's care to someone who—" He trailed off. "Someone who protected her children." Sarah finished bitterly. A nurse hurried past, deliberately avoiding eye contact. On the pediatric floor, where Sarah had spent countless hours healing other people's children, parents pulled their kids closer when she walked by. Her phone buzzed again, a message from her mother. "Channel 5 wants to interview us about why we enabled your deception." "Sarah, this has to stop." In the doctor's lounge, she overheard 2 colleagues. "Can you imagine hiding children from their father? I heard he's actually trying to make amends, and she's still being difficult." Sarah escaped to her office, but even there, She couldn't hide from the judgment. Her computer screen showed dozens of angry emails from parents demanding new doctors for their children. A soft knock at her door. It was Emily, a young patient's mother. "Dr. Martinez," Emily began hesitantly, We need to request a different surgeon for Tommy's operation." Sarah felt her heart break a little more. She'd been treating Tommy since his birth. "Emily, I've been Tommy's doctor for 5 years." "I know." Emily looked down. "But my husband, he says if you could hide something so big from your children's father, how can we trust you with our son?" After Emily left, Sarah sat alone in her office, surrounded by awards and certificates that suddenly seemed meaningless. Her phone kept buzzing with messages from former friends, colleagues, even her church group, all questioning, all judging. She opened her desk drawer, pulling out the twins' latest artwork. Lucas had drawn their family again, but this time with a crowd of angry faces surrounding them. Sophia's drawing showed a doctor, clearly meant to be Sarah, standing alone while other people pointed fingers. "They see it all," Sarah whispered to the empty room. "They feel everyone's judgment. Their mother, the villain in everyone's story." Her computer pinged with a new email from the hospital board. "Emergency meeting regarding Dr. Martinez's position, tomorrow 9 a.m. Outside her window, she could see more reporters gathering. 6 years of protecting her children, and now the world saw her as the monster who denied them a father's love. The cruelest irony? The same community that had once praised her for saving their children now questioned whether she deserved to be anyone's mother at all. "Mr. Chun, this is a private board meeting," Dr. Roberts began, but Alexander raised his hand. "I'm here to make a statement," he announced, his voice carrying authority yet lacking its usual coldness. "About Dr. Martinez's position at this hospital." Sarah felt her heart stop. This was it, his final move to destroy her career. 6 years ago, Alexander began, Sarah Martinez made a choice that many of you are now judging her for. A choice to protect our children from what she believed was a threat. He paused, looking directly at the board members. "That threat was me." Murmurs filled the room. Sarah gripped the edge of her chair. "I've spent the last week reviewing every decision I've made in my life," he continued. "Every family I've torn apart in the name of business. Every child I've used as leverage in corporate takeovers. And I've come to realize something profound. Sarah wasn't wrong about me." The board members exchanged glances. This wasn't the vindictive billionaire they'd expected. "Dr. Martinez isn't just a surgeon," Alexander's voice softened. "She's a mother who looked at the man I was, a man who saw children as assets, and made the hardest choice any parent could make. She chose their emotional safety over their material comfort." He pulled out a folder, placing it on the table. "Inside, you'll find my withdrawal of all legal actions against this hospital. Additionally, Chun Technologies will be doubling its investment in your pediatric wing, with no strings attached." Sarah's eyes widened in disbelief. But most importantly, Alexander turned to face the room of stunned medical professionals. "You'll find my public statement taking full responsibility for the circumstances that led to Sarah's choices. Because the truth is, the person who should be judged here isn't the mother who protected her children. It's the father who gave her reason to run." Dr. Roberts cleared his throat. "Mr. Chun, this is unexpected. Our children," Alexander continued, his voice cracking slightly, "are suffering not because of what their mother did 6 years ago, but because of what we're doing now. They don't need a father who wins at all costs. They need parents who can admit their mistakes and put their healing first." He turned to Sarah, their eyes meeting across the room. "I was wrong, not just 6 years ago, but these past weeks. Trying to destroy you publicly only proved you were right about me all along." The silence in the room was deafening. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face, years of tension beginning to crack. "This hospital doesn't need to question Dr. Martinez's judgment," Alexander concluded. "She did what every good doctor does. She protected those in her care from harm, even when that harm was me." As he turned to leave, he paused at the door. "Our children deserve better than what I've been." And this hospital deserves to keep a surgeon who understands that protecting children sometimes means making impossible choices. The boardroom remained silent long after he left, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Sarah sat there, trembling, as years of guilt and fear began to transform into something else: hope. Her phone buzzed with a text from Alexander. "I'm learning to be better. For them. For you. For all of us. Today," Dr. Bennett began gently, "we're going to try something different. Lucas, Sophia, would you like to ask your parents any questions? Anything at all?" Lucas clutched his favorite action figure tighter, his knuckles white. Sophia hugged her stuffed elephant closer to her chest. "There are no wrong questions," Dr. Bennett encouraged, "and no wrong feelings." Sophia spoke first, her voice barely a whisper. "Are we bad? What makes you think that, sweetheart?" Dr. Bennett prompted. "Because..." Sophia's lower lip trembled. "Because Daddy didn't want us. And now everyone at school says Mommy is bad for hiding us. So maybe we're bad too." Alexander's sharp intake of breath echoed in the room. Sarah's hands shook as she gripped the arms of her chair. Lucas suddenly stood up, his small face red with anger. "I hate everyone," he shouted, throwing his action figure across the room. "I hate Daddy for not wanting us. I hate Mommy for lying. I wanted you." Alexander's voice cracked as he interrupted. I just didn't know about you." "Then why didn't you look for us?" Lucas demanded, tears streaming down his face. "Tommy's daddy looked for him when he got lost at the mall for 10 minutes. You didn't look for us for years." Sarah moved to comfort Lucas, but Dr. Bennett held up a hand, letting the moment play out. "I didn't know I needed to look," Alexander said softly, moving to kneel at Lucas's level. "And that's not because you're bad. It's because I was bad." Sophia lifted her head. "You were. Very bad," Alexander admitted, his eyes filling with tears. "I was the kind of person who hurt people, who didn't know how to love properly. Your mommy, she saw that. She wanted to protect you from becoming like me. But now," Lucas asked, his anger giving way to curiosity. "Now," Alexander swallowed hard, "I'm learning how to be better, learning how to be worthy of being your father." Sarah watched as both children studied Alexander's face, searching for truth in his words. Sometimes, Dr. Bennett added, grown-ups make mistakes because they're scared. Your mommy was scared of your daddy being mean. Your daddy was scared of not having control. But being scared doesn't make anyone bad. Sophia stood up, walking slowly toward Alexander. "Do you know how to play piano?" "I'm learning Twinkle Twinkle." "I don't," Alexander admitted, his voice thick with emotion. "But I'd love to learn. From you." Lucas approached too, picking up his discarded action figure. "Do you like superheroes?" "I never had time for them before," Alexander said honestly. "Will you teach me about them?" Sarah watched as her children tentatively began sharing their world with their father. Each small gesture, Sophia showing Alexander her drawing, Lucas explaining his favorite superhero's powers, was a tiny bridge being built over a 6-year chasm. "This is just the beginning," Dr. Bennett reminded them all. "Healing takes time. Trust takes time. But today is a good start." As they left the session, Sophia slipped her small hand into Alexander's. "Can you come to my piano recital next week? I'm playing the song about the star." Alexander looked at Sarah, seeking permission. She nodded slightly, her own eyes wet with tears. "I wouldn't miss it for the world," he promised. And for the first time in his life, business meetings and corporate takeovers seemed utterly insignificant compared to a simple piano recital. "Mommy," Sophia whispered, fidgeting with her new recital dress. "What if I mess up and Daddy doesn't want to come anymore?" Sarah's hands stilled in her daughter's hair. "Sweetheart, that's not how love works." "But," Sophia's voice trembled, "but he didn't want us before." In the audience, Lucas tugged at Alexander's sleeve. "Dad, will you come to my baseball game next week too? Even if I don't hit any home runs?" Alexander felt his throat tighten at being called Dad for the first time. I'll be there, home runs or not. Promise. Lucas's eyes held a mix of hope and doubt that pierced Alexander's heart. Even if you have important business stuff? Before Alexander could respond, the lights dimmed. Sophia walked onto the stage, looking tiny behind the grand piano. Her eyes found Alexander in the crowd, and for a moment, fear flashed across her face. Alexander gave her a small wave and mouthed the words he'd been practicing with his therapist. I'm proud of you. Sophia's fingers touched the keys, and the first notes of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star filled the auditorium. In the middle of the song, she hit a wrong note and froze, panic evident in her posture. Alexander stood up slightly, catching her eye again. This time, he smiled and made a silly face, something he'd never done in his life. Sophia giggled softly, found her place, and continued playing. After the recital, as other parents congratulated their children, Alexander approached Sophia with the roses. But before he could speak, she burst into tears. I made a mistake, she sobbed. Now you won't want to be my daddy anymore. Alexander dropped to his knees, not caring about his expensive suit on the auditorium floor. Sophia, look at me, he whispered. Do you know what I thought when you hit that wrong note? She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. I thought about how brave you were to keep going, how strong you were to not give up. His voice cracked. I thought about how much better you are than I ever was, because when I made mistakes, I used to hurt people to hide them. Lucas joined them, wrapping his arms around his sister. Dad made a funny face, he announced. I've never seen a grown-up make a funny face at a fancy concert before. Sarah watched from a distance as Alexander pulled both children into a hug, his own tears falling freely now. I promise, he said firmly, that I will be here for every recital, every game, every moment, mistakes and all, because that's what real fathers do. And I'm learning to be a real father, not just a, he glanced at Sarah, not just a businessman playing with people's lives. Later that evening, as they all shared ice cream, Alexander's first time eating dinner in a casual restaurant, Sophia asked quietly, Can we put the roses in water at both houses? Some for Mommy's house and some for Daddy's. The simple question, acknowledging both homes, both parents, hung in the air like a precious, fragile thing. Of course, Sarah answered, meeting Alexander's eyes over their children's heads. In that moment, they shared an understanding. Their children's healing was worth more than any past hurt, any corporate empire, any pride. And maybe, Lucas added hopefully, we can all come to my baseball game together, like Tommy's family does. Alexander's phone buzzed with an important business call. For the first time in his life, he turned it off without checking it. Together, he agreed, watching his children's faces light up with hope. We can do it together. Mr. Chan, his assistant interrupted gently. The Beijing merger call is in 5 minutes. Alexander looked up from the glitter-covered paper, his usually immaculate suit now sparkling with tiny specks. Cancel it. But sir, the Asian markets. My son's baseball game is in an hour. Alexander cut in, carefully writing world's best dad in training, as Lucas had suggested. And my daughter is teaching me her new piano piece afterward. The door burst open as Marcus, his lead director, rushed in. Alexander, the Thompson deal is falling apart. We need to act now or... No, Alexander said simply, adding a heart sticker to the card. No more destroying families for profit. This isn't about families, Marcus protested. This is about business. Alexander stood, picking up a framed photo from his desk, Lucas and Sophia at their school science fair, both beaming with pride. Everything is about families, Marcus. I just didn't understand that before. His phone buzzed, a text from Sarah. Lucas is nervous about you seeing him pitch today. He's afraid of disappointing you. Alexander's heart clenched. He typed back, Tell him his father is proud of him, no matter what. I'm learning that's what real love means. In the parking lot, as he left the stunned executives behind, Alexander passed the wall where his father's portrait used to hang. Now, in its place was a crayon drawing of a family holding hands. At the baseball field, Lucas paced nervously in his uniform. Dad's really coming? Even though his company is doing important stuff. Sarah adjusted his cap. He promised, didn't he? Yeah, but... Lucas kicked at the dirt. What if I mess up? What if I'm not good enough to be a chun? Hey, slugger! Alexander's voice came from behind them. He was still in his business suit but covered in glitter. Ready to show me how it's done? Lucas's face lit up, then fell again. But what if I don't win? Alexander knelt down, not caring about his expensive suit pants in the dirt. Lucas, look at me. Do you know what makes me proudest about you? Hitting home runs? No. Alexander smiled, brushing dirt off his son's cheek. What makes me proud is how you keep trying, even when you're scared. How you help your sister with her piano practice even though you'd rather be playing. How you're teaching me to be better just by being you. Sarah watched as their son threw his arms around Alexander, leaving dust and chalk all over the pristine suit. From the bleachers, Sophia called out, "Daddy, I made up a special piano song for Lucas's game. Want to hear it?" After I finish this call, Alexander started to say automatically, then caught himself. Actually, yes, right now. Business can wait. As Lucas took the field and Sophia played her improvised baseball symphony on her toy keyboard, Alexander felt his phone, vibrating constantly in his pocket, crisis after crisis at the office. But for the first time in his life, the only crisis that mattered was making sure his children knew they were more important than any deal. "You're different," Sarah said quietly, sitting beside him in the bleachers. "I'm trying to be," he admitted, watching Lucas wind up for his first pitch. "Every day, I look at them and think about who I want them to see when they look at their father. Not a powerful CEO, not a wealthy businessman, just a dad who loves them. Look, Dad," Lucas shouted from the mound. "I'm going to throw my special pitch." Alexander stood up, cheering, his tie fluttering in the wind, glitter catching the sunlight. In that moment, he wasn't Alexander Chun, the ruthless business tycoon. He was just a father, learning that the most valuable assets in life couldn't be measured in stock prices or market shares. Should I continue with how this transformation affects both the family and his business empire? "There's been a remarkable change," Mrs. Thompson began, pulling out 2 drawings. "Look at Lucas's artwork from 2 months ago, and now." The first drawing showed dark clouds and angry scribbles. The second depicted a baseball game, with 4 clearly identifiable figures in the stands: Mom, Dad, Sophia, and me carefully labeled. "And Sophia's progress is equally striking," Mrs. Thompson continued, showing them 2 piano recital programs. On the first, Sophia had scratched out the family section entirely. On the latest, she'd proudly written both Mommy and Daddy in glittery pen. "But there's something else I want to show you," Mrs. Thompson smiled, pulling out a class assignment. "We asked the children to write about their heroes." Lucas's paper read, "My hero is my dad because he learns to be better. He made mistakes but says sorry and tries again. Like when I mess up in baseball but keep trying. He comes to my games even when his phone rings. That's braver than Superman." Alexander's hands trembled as he read the words. Sophia's essay was next. "My heroes are my mom and dad. Mom protected us like a superhero. Dad learned to be nice like when I teach him piano and he plays wrong but doesn't get mad anymore. They both show me that love is stronger than being perfect." Sarah wiped tears from her eyes as Mrs. Thompson continued. "Yesterday, during show and tell, something remarkable happened. Flashback to the previous day, my dad's company helps sick people get better," Lucas had announced proudly to his class. "But that's not the most important thing he does." "What's more important than being a big boss?" Tommy had asked. "He learns to play catch with me, and he sits with Sophia even when she plays the same song 20 times. And," Lucas had paused, looking at his sister. Sophia had finished for him. "And he shows us that saying sorry and fixing mistakes is more important than being right." present, the change in their emotional well-being is remarkable," Mrs. Thompson concluded. "They're no longer the angry and withdrawn children we saw months ago." Alexander's phone buzzed, another crisis at the office. But before he could reach for it, Sophia's voice drifted in from the hallway where the twins waited. "Daddy promised to watch me practice my new song today. He never breaks promises anymore." He left the phone in his pocket. "There's one more thing," Mrs. Thompson added, pulling out a parent volunteer form. "We're having career day next week. Both of you are invited to speak." "About being a surgeon and a CEO?" Sarah asked. "Actually," Mrs. Thompson smiled, "Lucas and Sophia have different ideas. They want you to talk about something more important, how to learn from mistakes and become better people." Alexander looked at Sarah, both remembering their own bitter battles just months ago. "We're still learning that ourselves," Sarah admitted. "That's exactly why the children want you to speak," Mrs. Thompson replied. "They're proud of how you're both trying." In their words, "Our parents show us it's okay to not be perfect as long as you keep trying to be better." Outside the conference room, they could hear Lucas telling another parent, "My dad used to only care about being the boss. Now he cares about being a good daddy. That's way more important." Alexander's eyes met Sarah's, sharing a moment of understanding. Their children weren't just healing. They were teaching them both what truly mattered. "Should we tell them about the joint birthday party plans?" he whispered to Sarah. "Let's surprise them," she smiled. "They've taught us about second chances. Maybe it's time we showed them how well we've learned." Congratulations to twins Lucas and Sofia Martinez for their outstanding piano duet. His fingers traced their faces on the screen. The boy had his jawline, his determined expression. The girl, his eyes, the same intensity he saw in the mirror every morning. "Sir," his assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "The board meeting starts in 5 minutes. Cancel it," he said, his voice barely recognizable. "Cancel everything." His phone buzzed with another message from his private investigator, Dr. Sarah Martinez, formerly Sarah Chun, chief of pediatric surgery at Boston General. Divorced 6 years ago, citing irreconcilable differences. Twins born 7 months after divorce filing. The math wasn't difficult. The timing aligned perfectly with their last month together, before she'd vanished without a trace. Flashback, "Mr. Chen, your wife's belongings have been removed from the penthouse." His security team had reported. "All accounts emptied. She's gone dark." He'd been furious then, but focused on his latest corporate takeover. Sarah had been collateral damage in a larger game, or so he'd thought. "Present 5 years," he whispered to the empty room. 5 years of their lives, gone. His computer chimed with more information flooding in. School records, medical files, activity schedules. 2 lives unfolding parallel to his own, just miles away from his corporate empire. Lucas Chun Martinez, born 3:42 a.m., star baseball player despite his age. Inherited his father's competitive streak. Sophia Chun Martinez, born 3:47 a.m., gifted pianist. Quiet but determined, just like him. The rage he'd expected to feel was there, but underneath it was something else. Something that made his chest tight and his hands unsteady. His phone rang, the board demanding answers about the canceled meeting. Major decisions hanging in balance. Millions at stake. For the first time in his life, Alexander Chen ignored it all. Instead, he opened his calendar, finding the date of the next school event. His fingers hovered over the keyboard as he typed a note to his assistant. "Clear my schedule for next Thursday. Parent-teacher conference at Boston Elementary." Then, pulling up another screen, he began what he did best, gathering intelligence, planning strategy. But this time, it wasn't for a corporate takeover. This time, it was personal. "Sarah," he whispered to himself, "did you really think you could hide them forever? Did you really think I wouldn't recognize my own blood?" The city lights twinkled below his office window, and somewhere out there, his children were getting ready for bed, not knowing their world was about to change.